The desert wind howled across the rocky ridge, carrying sand and the distant echo of gunfire. Lieutenant Kira Ashford lay motionless on the cliff, for her body pressed against stone, still hot from the day's brutal sun. 1,100 yards below, 8 American SEALs knelt in the dirt, hands bound behind their backs execution style. Sweat mixed with dust caked her face. Her throat burned from 12 hours without water. Her primary rifle, the Barrett M82 that had served her through the entire mission, lay in pieces 300 yards back, its scope shattered by an enemy sniper's bullet. Now she held only her M4A1, a weapon never designed for shots at this distance. Through the rifle's scope, she watched a Houthi fighter raise his AK-47 to the back of Commander Garrett Morrison's head. Morrison, the same man who had rejected her application to the SEALs just 48 hours ago. The same man who told her she was too small, too weak, that she would get good men killed. Her radio crackled, Sterling's voice urgent and sharp. "Kira, that shot is impossible. Wind is 15 miles per hour, gusting to 20. You're using the wrong weapon. Stand down." She didn't respond. Her finger found the trigger. Her breathing slowed. 62 beats per minute. 60. 58. The executioner's finger tightened on his trigger. Kira's world narrowed to the crosshairs, the wind, the mathematical certainty of physics and fate colliding in a single moment. She thought of her father, Master Chief Maxwell Ashford, teaching her to shoot when she was 12 years old. His voice in her memory calm and steady. "Kira, a weapon is just metal and mechanics. But you, your judgment, your patience, your heart, that's what makes the impossible shot possible." She exhaled half a breath. The world stopped spinning. She fired, 1,100 yards, through desert wind that could push a bullet 3 feet off course, with a weapon designed for half that distance. Against a moving target and failing light. The executioner's head snapped back. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Chaos erupted in the compound below. Searchlights blazed to life. Men shouted in Arabic. Automatic weapons fire ripped through the night, wild and undisciplined, seeking a target they couldn't see. Kira worked the bolt, acquired her second target, another fighter moving toward Morrison, and fired again. He fell. She fired a third time. Another man down. The fourth shot went wide as return fire smacked into the rocks around her position, forcing her to roll right away from the ledge. Her radio exploded with voices. Sterling, Dalton, Bryn, all shouting, all demanding she fall back, extracts, survive. She keyed her mic once. Just once. Her voice was steady, almost calm. "Mission isn't done. Morrison lives or I don't come home." Then she pulled the radio from her ear and moved into the darkness, hunting. 48 hours earlier, San Diego, California. The conference room at Naval Special Warfare Command smelled like coffee leather and decades of military tradition. 5 SEAL commanders sat behind a long table, their uniforms crisp, their faces weathered by sun and combat and time. Behind them, the flags of the American Navy, the SEAL Trident. To the side, framed photographs of naval warriors stretching back to Vietnam, to World War II, to legends who had earned their place in history through blood and sacrifice. Kira Ashford stood at attention in the center of the room. 27 years old, 5 foot 2 inches, 115 pounds. Her dress uniform was perfect ribbons earned through Army Ranger School expert marksmanship badges, the Combat Infantry Man Badge her father had received posthumously, and her mother had quietly pinned to her chest before she left for this interview. Commander Garrett Morrison sat in the center of the panel, 62 years old. Silver hair buzzed to stubble, eyes like chips of blue ice. A chest full of medals spanning 4 decades of service, Panama, Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq. A man who had buried friends, who had led men through hell, who believed in the old ways with the conviction of someone who had survived when faith and tradition was all that stood between life and death. He held Kira's file like it was something fragile or explosive. "Lieutenant Ashford," his voice carried the roughness of 1,000 battlefield orders. "Your scores are exceptional. Top 5% at West Point. Ranger qualified. Perfect marks in marksmanship, a new record in fact. Shattered a 40-year-old standard set by..." He paused, looked down at the file. "Master Chief Maxwell Ashford." "My father, sir." Morrison's jaw tightened. Something flickered across his face, recognition, pain, memory. He closed the file with deliberate care. "Your father was one of the finest warriors I ever served with. A legend in the sniper community. His shot in Kandahar 1,600 yards through a sandstorm saved 32 Marines. They gave him the Silver Star posthumously when he died in 2012. "I know, sir. I was 13. The room fell silent. The other commanders shifted in their seats. One, a younger man, maybe 50, cleared his throat softly. Morrison's eyes never left her face. Then you understand what it means to serve, what it tends. Yes, sir. You understand that SEAL operations require physical strength beyond what most humans possess, that we routinely carry 80-pound packs through terrain that breaks men twice your size, that the ocean doesn't care about your scores or your name or your father's medals. It will drown you just the same. Kira's spine stayed straight, her voice stayed level. Sir, I carried 95 pounds through the Ranger Mountain course. I finished in the top 20%. I beat 80% of the male candidates. Rangers aren't SEALs. No, sir, they're Army, which is why I'm here to serve with the best. Morrison stood. He was tall, 6'3", and when he came around the table, he seemed to fill the entire room. He stopped 3 feet in front of her, looking down, measuring. I've been in this uniform for 40 years, Lieutenant. I've trained thousands of warriors. I've buried hundreds. And I've learned one absolute truth. In combat, the weakest link kills everyone. One person who can't keep up, who can't carry the load, who becomes a burden, that person gets the whole team killed. Sir, I won't be that person. You're 115 pounds. Sir, respectfully, my size is not my weakness. It's my advantage. I'm harder to spot. I need less water, less food. I can move through spaces larger operators cannot. And I can make shots they can't make because I understand patience. I understand precision. Morrison's face remained stone. You think being small is an advantage in the teams? I think, sir, that being underestimated is the greatest advantage any warrior can have. For a moment, just a heartbeat, something like respect flickered in Morrison's eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold certainty of command. Your application is denied. The words hit like a physical blow. Kira felt her stomach drop, felt the heat rising in her face. But she didn't move, didn't flinch. Sir, may I ask why? Because I won't be responsible for another Ashford dying under my watch. Morrison's voice dropped low, meant only for her. Your father saved my life in Kandahar. Took a bullet meant for me. I carried him 5 miles to the evac zone and he died 20 feet from the helicopter. His last words were about you making sure you'd be taken care of. He stepped back, his face rigid with controlled emotion. I owed Maxwell Ashford everything. I won't repay that debt by sending his daughter into combat where her size, her strength will make her a liability. Request denied, dismissed. Kira saluted, sharp, perfect, professional. Then she turned on her heel and walked out of the room, her footsteps echoing in the hallway like gunshots. She made it to her truck before the tears came. Hot, angry, humiliating tears that she wiped away with the back of her hand, hating herself for the weakness. She'd trained for this for 5 years, given everything, proved herself again and again. And still, it wasn't enough. She drove on autopilot, barely seeing the California coastline, the late afternoon sun, turning the Pacific into liquid gold. She drove until she reached the cemetery. Fort Rosecrans National Cemetery sprawled across the hills overlooking San Diego Bay, row after row of white headstones marching in perfect formation, an army of the dead standing eternal watch. She knew the path by heart, Section 42, Row 17. Grave 23, Master Chief Maxwell Ashford, U.S. Navy SEALs, 1974-2012. Beloved father, warrior legend. Kira knelt in the grass. The stone was warm under her hand. Fresh flowers lay at its base, white lilies, her father's favorite. Someone had been here recently. Someone who remembered. Hey, Dad? Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat, started again. So that went about as well as getting shot. Morrison said no, said I'm too small, said I'd get men killed. She laughed bitter. Said he wouldn't be responsible for another Ashford dying, like you dying was his fault somehow. The wind moved through the cemetery, rustling the flags at each grave, hundreds of them, thousands all snapping in the breeze. I don't know what to do now. I've wanted this my whole life, since I was 12 and you took me to the range and taught me how a rifle breathes, how wind talks, how patience is the only thing that separates a good shot from an impossible one. She closed her eyes. You told me I had the gift. You told me I could be better than you. Was that a lie? Did you just say that because I was your daughter? Footsteps in the grass behind her. Slow, measured, the slight drag of a bad leg. He told you that because it was true. Kira spun hand instinctively, going to her hip, where a weapon would be if she were armed. A man stood 20 feet away. Old, late 60s with silver hair swept back from a face carved by weather and war. He wore jeans and a plain shirt, but he carried himself like a soldier, like someone who had spent his life being ready for violence. You were at the grave before me, Kira said. Not a question. Every month for 12 years. He moved closer, limping slightly on his left leg. Your father was my student, my friend, the best natural shooter I ever trained. Who are you, Gitano? Colonel Wyatt Sterling, retired. I ran the Marine Scout Sniper program for 15 years. Trained your father when he was 23, young cocky, thought he knew everything. Sterling smiled a sad expression. Took me about 3 days to break him of that. Then I taught him how to really shoot. Kira stood slowly. I've heard stories. Dad talked about you, said you made an impossible shot in Somalia Black Hawk Down. Saved a dozen men. Lost 3 fingers making that shot. Sterling held up his left hand. The ring middle and index fingers were gone, leaving only thumb and pinky. RPG explosion. But I got the shooter before he could fire again. Sometimes the kit is worth the mission. They stood in silence, the wind moving between them, carrying the smell of ocean and cut grass and memory. Sterling turned to the grave. Maxwell told me about you, said you were special, said you saw things other people didn't, angles, trajectories, possibilities. Said you made your first 1,000-yard shot when you were 14. He looked at her. Was he right? 1,050 yards. Wind was 8 miles per hour from the northwest. Target was a watermelon on a fence post. Kira's voice was steady now, professional. I compensated for Coriolis effect, barometric pressure, and temperature differential. Dad said it was beginner's luck. Made me do it again, and again. I made it 7 times out of 10. Sterling nodded slowly. And Morrison rejected you today. How did you? Because Garrett Morrison is an old war dog who thinks the only way to honor the dead is to protect their children from following the same path. Sterling's voice carried no judgment, only understanding. He rejected you because he loved your father, because he blames himself for Maxwell's death, because he looks at you and sees the ghost of his best friend. That's not fair. War isn't fair, Lieutenant. It's just war. Kira felt the anger building again, hot and righteous. So what, I just give up, abandon everything I've worked for because Morrison has survivor's guilt? Sterling studied her for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notebook, leather-worn pages yellow with age. He held it out. Maxwell gave me this the night before his last mission. Said if anything happened to him, I should give it to you when you were ready. Sterling's voice roughened. I think you're ready now. Kira took the notebook with trembling hands. She recognized her father's handwriting, immediately neat, precise, each letter, formed with the same care he brought to every shot. She opened to the last page. Read the words written there. Sterling, if you're reading this to Kira, I'm gone. Don't let her mourn too long. Don't let her quit. She has something I never had, the perfect combination of patience and fire. She sees the world in angles and equations, but she feels it in her heart. Train her. Push her harder than you pushed me. She can take it. She's stronger than she knows. And when she's ready, when she's proven herself beyond any doubt, tell her this: being a warrior isn't about size or strength. It's about the moment when everything is impossible and you make the shot anyway. She'll understand. Max Kira's vision blurred. She closed the notebook, carefully holding it against her chest like a lifeline. Sterling's voice was gentle now. Elite SEALs were captured 3 days ago in Yemen. Houthi rebels backed by Iran. The men are being held in an old Soviet compound in the mountains. Intelligence says they'll be executed in 72 hours, public executions broadcast on the internet to humiliate America. Why are you telling me this? Because the government won't authorize a rescue. Too politically sensitive, too risky. But there are people, private contractors, former military, who believe those men deserve a chance. Sterling's eyes locked onto hers. I'm putting together a team, small, precise. We go in dark extract, the hostages disappear before anyone knows we were there. And you want me? I need a sniper who can make impossible shots. Someone who understands that sometimes the mission isn't about strength, it's about being in the right place with the right skills at exactly the right moment. He paused. Someone who has something to prove. Kira looked at the grave, at the notebook in her hands, at the cemetery stretching out in all directions, thousands of warriors who had made their choice, who had said yes when the mission called. Who are the hostages? Sterling's face remained neutral. 8 SEALs from Team 3, led by Commander Garrett Morrison. The irony hit like a punch. The man who had rejected her, the man who didn't believe in her, the man who thought she would get people killed. When do we leave? 72 hours. Training starts tomorrow morning. Nevada Desert, I'll send you coordinates. Sterling turned to go, then stopped. One more thing, Lieutenant. This mission is illegal, unsanctioned. If we're caught, the government will disavow us. We'll be labeled mercenaries, criminals. You'll lose your military career, your pension, possibly your freedom. And if we succeed, then 8 good men come home alive. And you'll have answered the only question that matters, not whether you're good enough for the teams, but whether you're willing to risk everything for warriors who don't believe in you. Kira looked at her father's grave one last time. She thought about Morrison's words, about the rejection, about the anger that had burned in her chest all afternoon. Then she thought about 8 men kneeling in the dirt waiting for rescue, waiting for someone to care enough to come for them. Send me the coordinates, Colonel. I'll be there. Sterling nodded. He started to walk away, then paused. Your father would be proud, Kira, not because you're doing this, but because you understand why it matters. Then he was gone, limping through the rows of graves, a ghost among ghosts. Kira stayed a moment longer. She placed the notebook carefully in her jacket pocket over her heart. She stood at attention and saluted sharp, perfect, a daughter honoring her father's memory. Watch over me, Dad, she whispered. I'm going to make you proud. The wind answered, carrying the flags in a rippling wave of red, white, and blue. 60 hours later, Nevada Desert, the sun hammered down like a physical weight. 110 degrees, the kind of heat that made distance shimmer and turned the desert into a furnace. Kira stood at the edge of a shooting range carved into the mountainside, her gear laid out with military precision: Barrett M82 50 caliber rifle, 4A1 carbine, Sig Sauer P320 pistol, combat knife, tactical vest, communications equipment. Across from her, 3 other people waited. This was Sterling's team. This was her squad for the mission. Sterling himself stood off to the side, watching with the quiet intensity of a man who had spent his life evaluating warriors. Introductions, he said, his voice carried across the desert without effort. Quick and dirty. We don't have time for bonding. You need to know who has your back and what they bring to the fight. He pointed to a man standing near a vehicle, tall, muscular, dark hair, buzzed short, eyes hidden behind sunglasses. Sergeant Dalton Hayes, Delta Force for 8 years, breaching specialist, 217 confirmed operations. If it needs to explode, he makes it explode. If it needs to die quickly, he makes it die quietly. Dalton nodded once, didn't smile, didn't speak, just evaluated Kira with the cold assessment of someone who had seen too many people fail under pressure. Lieutenant Bryn Calloway. Sterling gestured to a woman near the medical supplies, early 30s, athletic build, strawberry blonde hair pulled back tight. Navy Corpsman. 3 tours in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan. She's kept more men alive in worse conditions than you can imagine. Communications expert. If something goes wrong with your body or your radio, she fixes it. Bryn met Kira's eyes and gave a small nod. Professional, measuring, not hostile, but not welcoming either. And Lieutenant Kira Ashford. Sterling's voice carried weight now, introducing her to the others like she was something worth their attention. Army Ranger qualified, West Point graduate, holds the new record for long-range precision shooting, broke a 40-year standard set by her father, Master Chief Maxwell Ashford. Some of you might remember that name. Dalton's sunglasses came off, his eyes narrowed. Maxwell Ashford, the Kandahar shot, 1,600 yards through a sandstorm. He studied Kira more carefully now. That was your father. Yes. He was a legend, saved my unit in 2010. Made a shot that shouldn't have been possible, took out a sniper who had us pinned for 6 hours. Dalton's voice carried respect, but also doubt. But being his daughter doesn't mean you inherited his skill. No, Kira said quietly. It just means I had a better teacher. Dalton almost smiled. Almost. Sterling stepped forward. Here's the reality. We have 60 hours before we deploy. 60 hours to become a team, to learn each other's movements, to trust each other with our lives. That's not enough time. Not even close. But it's what we have. He pulled out a tactical map and spread it on the hood of a vehicle. Yemen's northern mountains marked with red circles and coordinates. The target compound is here. His finger tapped a valley surrounded by peaks. Old Soviet training facility from the 80s. Houthis have held it for 3 years. It's a fortress, 4 guard towers, reinforced walls, underground bunkers. Intelligence says 40 to 50 hostiles, well-armed, well-trained. Bryn leaned in. What's our insertion point? Halo jumped 20 miles out. We hike in, establish an overwatch position here. Sterling pointed to a ridge, 1,100 yards from the compound. Kira provides sniper support. Dalton and Bryn conduct the assault. I coordinate from Tactical Operations Center remote. Dalton's jaw tightened. 2 operators for an assault on a compound with 50 hostiles. The element is surprise, speed, precision. Sterling's eyes moved to Kira. And a sniper who can drop targets before they know we're there. I've worked with snipers, Dalton said. His voice wasn't hostile, just matter of fact. Good ones, great ones. And I've seen them miss under pressure, seen them hesitate, seen them freeze when real bullets start flying back at them. He looked at Kira. No offense, Lieutenant, but you look like you weigh about as much as my rifle. Can you handle combat stress? Kira met his eyes. Put me on the range. Let's find out. The shooting range stretched 800 yards into the desert. Targets at various distances, steel silhouettes, paper bullseyes, obstacles, and barriers, and creating a realistic combat environment. Heat waves shimmered across the sand, distorting distance, making accurate shooting a test of skill and mathematics. Sterling set the parameters. 800 yards, 5 targets. You have 30 seconds. Wind is gusting 8 to 12 miles per hour from the west. Temperature is 108 degrees. He looked at Dalton. You first. Dalton moved to the firing line without hesitation. He settled behind a Barrett M82, the same rifle Kira would be using, and took his time setting up. Checked his scope, calculated windage. His movements were smooth, professional, the product of hundreds of hours of training. He fired. The crack of the .50 caliber echoed across the desert. 800 yards downrange, a steel target rang and fell. He worked the bolt, acquired his second target, fired, another hit, third target, fourth, fifth, all within 30 seconds. All hits, though one was slightly off-center. Dalton stood, his face neutral. 4 perfect, 1 acceptable. That's combat standard. Sterling nodded. Lieutenant Ashford, your turn. Kira approached the firing line. She didn't rush, didn't try to prove anything. She simply knelt behind the Barrett, feeling its weight, its balance. She'd fired similar weapons 1,000 times in training, on ranges and competitions, but never in combat, never when lives depended on each shot. She thought of her father, heard his voice in her memory. The target doesn't know you're there yet. Make every second of that ignorance count. When the moment is perfect, you'll know. Your body will know before your mind does. She settled into position, checked her scope. The first target wavered in the heat shimmer 800 yards away, barely visible through the distortion. She calculated wind drift at this temperature, at this distance. An 8-mile-per-hour wind would push the bullet approximately 6 inches right. She adjusted. She fired. The target fell. She didn't pause, didn't celebrate. Just worked the bolt smooth, mechanical, and acquired target 2. Fired, hit. Target 3, fire, hit. Target 4, fire, hit. Target 5, the hardest one, partially obscured behind a barrier that simulated a hostage situation. She had to hit the target without touching the barrier. 6 inches of clearance at 800 yards. Through heat, shimmer, and wind. She exhaled slowly, adjusted her aim 2 degrees left, squeezed the trigger. The target fell. The barrier remained undamaged. 23 seconds. 5 perfect hits. Kira stood, her face calm, and stepped back from the firing line. Dalton stared at the targets, then at her, then back at the targets. How did you the 5th shot? That was physics, Kira said quietly, and patience. Sterling's voice carried approval. Again, both of you, 1,000 yards, moving targets. They shot again and again. At 1,000 yards, Kira matched Dalton's shot for shot. At 1,200 yards, the extreme edge of the Barrett's effective range, she pulled ahead. Her groups were tighter. Her timing was faster. Her adjustments were instinctive, based on feeling as much as calculation. By the time the sun began to sink toward the western mountains, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Dalton's skepticism had shifted to something else. Not quite respect, not yet, but acknowledgement. Recognition that Kira Ashford was not a liability. He approached her as she cleaned her rifle, his face thoughtful. Your father really taught you all this. Starting when I was 12, he said most people try to force the rifle to do what they want. But the best shooters, they listen to the rifle. They become part of the weapon. They stop thinking and start feeling. That's not how they teach it in sniper school. My father didn't go to sniper school. He learned from Colonel Sterling, who learned from a Marine in Vietnam, who learned from someone in Korea. It's a tradition passed down from shooter to shooter, generation to generation. She looked up at him. It's not about the technique. It's about understanding that shooting is as much art as science. Dalton considered this. Then he extended his hand. I was wrong about you, Lieutenant. You're not a liability. Kira shook his hand. I'm not trying to prove I'm as good as you, Sergeant. I'm trying to prove I'm as good as my father. From what I've seen today, Dalton's voice was quiet, sincere. You already are. 24 hours before insertion, the briefing room was cooler than the desert outside, air-conditioned and filled with maps, satellite imagery, and the tools of modern warfare. Sterling stood at the head of a table, his face grave in the fluorescent light. Final intelligence update. He tapped a satellite photo. The hostages are being held here, underground bunker, beneath the main compound. 8 men, Commander Morrison and 7 others from SEAL Team 3. They've been held for 12 days, interrogated, beaten, but all still alive. Bryn leaned forward. What's the execution timeline? 48 hours from now. Public execution broadcast online. The Houthis want maximum propaganda value. American Special Forces killed on camera, proof that even our elite warriors can be defeated. Kira studied Morrison's face in the intelligence photo, older than when she'd seen him 3 days ago. Thinner, bruised, but his eyes still carried that same intensity, that same iron will. Who's the hostile commander? Dalton asked. Sterling pulled up another photo. A man in his 50s, lean and dangerous looking, with cold eyes and a battlefield bearing. Nasir al-Madani, former Yemeni Special Forces, trained by the Russians in Chechnya. He's not just a rebel leader, he's a military professional, counter-insurgency expert. And Sterling paused. He specializes in hunting snipers. The room went quiet. Explain, Kira said. Al-Madani has killed 7 Western snipers in the last 3 years. British, French, American. He studies their methods, uses counter-sniper teams, thermal imaging, coordinated sweeps. He knows every trick, every tactic. Sterling's eyes found Kira's. If you take a shot and miss, he'll find you, and he won't miss. Then I won't miss. Confidence is good, Lieutenant, but understand this isn't a training exercise. These men will be hunting you, and they're very, very good at it. Sterling spread out the tactical plan. Insertion is 0200 hours local time. Halo jump from 25,000 feet. We land here 20 miles from the target. 18-hour hike through mountain terrain, rough, steep, exposed. We reach the overwatch position by 2,000 hours the following night. Dalton traced the route. That's a lot of exposure time. If we're spotted, we won't be. Sterling's voice carried absolute certainty. We move at night, we stay off the roads. We become ghosts. He turned to Kira. You'll establish your position here. He pointed to a rocky outcrop on the satellite image. 1,100 yards from the compound. Elevated position, good sight lines, but also exposed. If they locate you, you'll have limited cover. I'll make it work. Your primary targets are the guard towers. 4 positions, 2 men each. You eliminate them silently using suppressed fire. Once the towers are clear, Dalton and Bryn move to the fence line. Then you provide overwatch. Any hostile that threatens the assault team, you drop them. Bryn looked at the compound. What about counter-sniper teams? Intelligence says Al-Madani has 4 dedicated snipers. Positions unknown. They'll be watching for exactly this kind of attack. Sterling's face was grim. Kira, you'll be their primary target. The moment you fire, they'll be hunting you. 4-on-1, man. Dalton shook his head. Those aren't good odds. No, Sterling agreed. They're not, which is why this mission requires someone who can think 3 moves ahead. Someone who understands that sometimes the best shot is the one you don't take. He looked at Kira. You'll be making life and death decisions in split seconds. No time to call for guidance. No time to second guess. You see a threat, you eliminate it. You see a risk, you adapt. Trust your training. Trust your instinct. Kira nodded. Her heart hammered in her chest, but her voice stayed steady. I understand, sir. One more thing. Sterling's voice dropped lower. If the mission goes wrong, if you're compromised, if the team is in danger, your priority is survival. Get to the extraction point. We'll abort and try again. And the hostages? There's no rescue if the rescued team is dead. The brutal logic of warfare. The cold calculation that sometimes saving 8 men meant sacrificing everything. Or saving nothing. Dalton spoke up. With respect, Colonel, if we're going in, we're bringing everyone out, all of us or none of us. That's not the mission. That's exactly the mission. Dalton's voice was hard. Those are SEALs down there, my brothers. We don't leave them behind. We don't abort because it gets hard. We go in, we extract them, we come home. That's the only option that matters. Bryn nodded her agreement. He's right, sir. We're either all in or we shouldn't go at all. Sterling looked at each of them in turn. Then his eyes found Kira's. Lieutenant, she thought of Morrison's face, his rejection, his words about her father. The weight of all that history, all that expectation, all that doubt. We bring them home, Colonel, whatever it takes. Sterling was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded, something like pride flickering across his weathered face. All right, then, let's make sure you're ready. Dalton Bryn, final equipment check. Kira, you're with me. One last lesson before we deploy. They walked out into the desert as the sun set, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. The temperature had dropped to 90 degrees, almost pleasant by comparison to the day's heat. Sterling led Kira to a ridge overlooking the valley where a single target stood at 1,200 yards, the absolute limit of the Barrett's effective range. Your father made his legendary shot at 1,600 yards, Sterling said, through a sandstorm, wind gusting to 30 miles per hour, visibility less than 200 yards. He saved 32 Marines with that shot, killed an insurgent sniper who had them pinned down. I know the story. Do you know why it worked? Why that impossible shot succeeded when every calculation said it should fail? Kira shook her head. Sterling handed her the Barrett. Because Maxwell didn't trust the math. He trusted something deeper. He felt the shot. Understood that sometimes physics isn't enough, you need instinct. You need to see the bullet's path not with your eyes, but with your soul. That sounds like mysticism, Colonel. Call it whatever you want, but I've trained hundreds of snipers. The good ones follow the rules. The great ones know when to break them. He pointed at the target. Make the shot. Kira settled into position. 1,200 yards. No wind, rare in the desert, a gift. Temperature cooling. Perfect conditions as far as long-range shooting was concerned. She calculated the drop. At this distance, the bullet would fall nearly 30 feet from its initial trajectory. She adjusted her scope, compensating for gravity, for air resistance, for the slight curvature of the earth itself. She fired. The target remained standing. She'd missed, not by much, maybe 6 inches left, but a miss nonetheless. Sterling's voice was calm. Again. She adjusted. Fired. Another miss, this time 3 inches right. Stop thinking, Sterling said. Stop calculating. Just feel. Colonel, ballistics is math. I can't just... Your father couldn't explain it either. He'd run all the numbers, make all the adjustments, and then at the last second, right before he fired, he'd make this tiny correction. Barely visible, like the rifle itself was telling him what to do. Sterling knelt beside her. The mind calculates, but the body knows. Trust it. Kira closed her eyes, breathed deep, thought of her father's hands on her shoulders when she was 12, teaching her to shoot. His voice patient and certain. The target doesn't know you're there yet. Make every second of that ignorance count. When the moment is perfect, you'll know. Your body will know before your mind does. She opened her eyes, settled into the rifle, didn't look at her calculations, didn't second-guess her adjustments. She just aimed, breathed, and let her instinct guide the final tiny movement, barely a millimeter, just a whisper of correction. She fired. 1,200 yards away, the target fell. Sterling smiled, a rare expression on his weathered face. There it is. That's the gift. Your father had it. Now you have it. He stood, offered her a hand up. Tomorrow you'll need more than skill, more than training. You'll need that instinct. Because the mission will go wrong. Plans always do. And when chaos erupts, when everything is falling apart, that's when great warriors are born. They walked back toward the base in silence. Above them, stars began to appear, thousands of them, millions. The vast and indifferent universe watching their small human drama with eternal patience. Kira thought about Morrison, about her father, about the 8 men waiting in darknesses, hoping for rescue, about the impossible odds and the brutal reality of combat. She thought about the moment just hours away now, when she would have to prove that being small, being underestimated, being doubted had made her into exactly the warrior this mission needed. Colonel, she said quietly, what if I fail? Sterling stopped, looked at her with those ancient knowing eyes. Then you fail, and 8 good men die, and you live with that for the rest of your life. He paused. But failure isn't determined by the outcome, Lieutenant. It's determined by whether you gave everything you had, whether you fought until there was nothing left to fight with, whether you honored the warriors who came before you by being worthy of their legacy. And if I succeed, then you'll understand what your father understood, that being a warrior isn't about the medals or the glory or the recognition. It's about the moment when everything is impossible and you take the shot anyway. Because someone has to, because lives depend on it, because that's what warriors do. He started walking again. Over his shoulder, his voice carried back to her on the desert wind. Get some rest, Lieutenant. Tomorrow we go to war. Kira stood alone under the stars. She pulled out her father's notebook, the one Sterling had given her at the cemetery, and opened to that last page. Read his words again in the fading light. Being a warrior isn't about size or strength. It's about the moment when everything is impossible and you make the shot anyway. She closed the notebook, looked up at the stars, whispered into the darkness. I'm ready, Dad. Watch over me. Guide my hand. Help me bring them home. The wind answered with silence. Tomorrow she would deploy. Tomorrow 8 men's lives would depend on her skill, her judgment, her courage. Tomorrow Lieutenant Kira Ashford would discover whether she was truly her father's daughter, or whether Commander Morrison had been right all along. The transport aircraft shook with turbulence at 25,000 feet. In the cargo bay, 4 figures sat in darkness, breathing oxygen through masks, preparing for a jump that would begin the mission or end it before it started. The temperature at altitude was minus 40 degrees. Ice crystals formed on the metal wall, glittering in the red jump lights. Kira checked her equipment for the 20th time. Main chute, reserve chute, oxygen, and altimeter. Weapons secured to her body, the Barrett M82 in a hard case strapped to her back, the M4A1 across her chest, the Sig Sauer on her hip. 85 pounds of gear, more than half her body weight. Enough to kill her if the chute failed, or if she landed wrong, or if any of 1,000 variables went sideways. Through the oxygen mask, Sterling's voice crackled in her ear. He wasn't jumping with them at 67 with a bad leg. Halo insertion would probably kill him. He'd coordinate from the Tactical Operations Center, a mobile unit positioned 40 miles from the target, monitoring their communications and satellite feeds. 2 minutes to drop zone, weather is clear, winds at altitude 18 knots from the west. Ground winds estimated at 8 knots. Visibility excellent, full moon tonight, which helps navigation but increases detection risk. Dalton gave a thumbs up from across the bay. Even through his oxygen mask, his eyes were calm, professional. He'd done this hundreds of times. For him, jumping into enemy territory at night was just another Tuesday. Bryn checked her medical pack, her movements efficient and practiced. She'd told Kira during training that she'd made 17 combat jumps in her career. Lost count of how many men she'd saved. Never lost count of how many she couldn't. The loadmaster held up one finger. 1 minute. Kira's heart hammered against her ribs. Her first combat jump. Her first real mission. Everything she'd trained for, everything she'd sacrificed, everything she'd proven, it all came down to the next few hours. She thought of her father. Wondered if he'd felt this fear before his missions. Wondered if he'd ever doubted himself in the moments before violence erupted and choices became irrevocable. The rear ramp began to open. The roar of wind filled the cargo bay, a howling beast that wanted to pull them out into the void. Below, Yemen stretched out in shades of silver and black under the moonlight, mountains, valleys, the distant gleam of scattered villages. Somewhere down there, 8 Americans waited for rescue, or execution. The loadmaster pointed at Dalton. Go. Dalton moved to the ramp without hesitation. 1 second he was there, the next he was gone, swallowed by darkness and wind and the absolute certainty of gravity. Bryn followed. Then it was Kira's turn. She walked to the edge, looked down at 25,000 feet of nothing. Her training screamed at her to step back, to stay safe, to not jump into the abyss. But her father's voice was louder. Trust yourself, Kira. Trust your training. Trust that when you jump, you'll fly. She jumped. The wind hit like a physical blow, spinning her, tumbling her through space. For 3 seconds, she fell out of control, the world rotating in impossible directions. Then her training took over. She arched her back, spread her arms and legs, stabilized her position. The tumbling stopped. The fall became flight. 20,000 feet. 19, 18. She fell at 120 miles per hour, the wind screaming past her body, the ground rushing up to meet her. Through the darkness, she could see the others, Dalton's chute, not yet deployed, Bryn falling in perfect form. They were arrows shot from heaven, deadly and precise. 15,000 feet. Kira pulled her ripcord. The main chute deployed with a bone-jarring snap, jerking her from freefall to controlled descent in an instant. Above her, the rectangular parachute caught the wind and suddenly she was gliding, steering, navigating through the night sky toward the desert floor. She keyed her radio. Ashford chute deployed, on course. Dalton's voice, Hayes deployed. Bryn's voice, Callaway deployed. All systems green. Sterling's voice from 40 miles away. Good jumps, maintain radio silence from here on. Go dark, go deadly, bring them home. The desert rose to meet her. Kira flared her chute at the last moment, killing her forward momentum and hit the ground running. She collapsed her chute quickly, efficiently, and began burying it in the sand. Standard procedure: leave no evidence. Dalton materialized from the darkness like a ghost. He'd landed 50 yards away, his chute already buried. Bryn joined them seconds later. They formed a tight perimeter, weapons out, scanning for threats. Nothing moved in the desert. No lights, no voices, no sign they'd been detected. Dalton checked his GPS, pointed northeast. They had 20 miles to cover before dawn, 18 hours to reach the overwatch position, and then the mission would truly begin. They moved into the darkness, three shadows crossing a landscape of stone and sand and ancient violence. Hour 14, 1600 hours. The hike was brutal, not because of the distance — 20 miles was nothing for soldiers of their caliber — but because of the terrain. Yemen's northern mountains were a maze of steep climbs, loose scree, and exposed ridgelines where a single misstep could send you tumbling hundreds of feet. They moved during daylight only when absolutely necessary, hiding during the hottest hours when aircraft or drones might spot them. Kira's body screamed in protest. The 85-pound pack dug into her shoulders, her hips, her lower back. Her legs burned from the constant climbing. Her mouth was dry, despite regular water breaks. The heat was oppressive, 115 degrees, in the shade except there was no shade. But she never asked to rest, never complained, never showed weakness. Dalton watched her with growing respect. He'd expected her to slow them down, to need extra breaks, to struggle with the weight and the heat and the brutal reality of infiltration. Instead, she kept pace. When they climbed, she climbed. When they ran, she ran. When they stopped, she immediately began scanning their perimeter, weapon ready, eyes alert. At hour 12, they'd taken cover in a dried riverbed to wait out a Yemeni military patrol, three trucks moving along a distant road. They'd lain motionless for 90 minutes while the patrol passed, then passed again on its return route. Kira hadn't moved, hadn't shifted position, just lay in the sand like a stone, patient and still. Now, as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, they approached their final objective: the overwatch position, the place where Kira would set up her rifle and become the mission's eye, its guardian, its deadly precision instrument. Dalton called a halt at the base of a rocky ridge. He studied the terrain through binoculars, then consulted the satellite imagery on his tablet. That's our position, 1,100 yards to the compound. Elevated, good sight lines, minimal exposure from below. Kira drank water, rationing it carefully. What's our timeline? We establish the hide position by 1900 hours. Full darkness by 2000. Then we wait for your call. You eliminate the tower guards, we move to the fence line. Dalton lowered the binoculars. But first we need to make sure those counter-sniper teams don't see us coming. If they detect movement on this ridge, the whole mission is blown before we fire a shot. They waited for darkness, waited as the temperature dropped from unbearable to merely oppressive. Waited as the sun painted the mountains in shades of red and gold, then purple, then black. At 1845 hours, they moved. The final approach took 45 minutes of slow, careful climbing. Every step was calculated. Every movement was deliberate. They were predators now stalking prey that was also hunting them. Kira reached the hide position first. It was perfect, a natural formation of rocks that provided cover from below while offering clear sight lines to the compound. She immediately began setting up the Barrett, arranging her equipment with the precision of ritual. Rifle, ammunition, spotting scope, rangefinder, wind meter. Through the scope, the compound materialized. 4 guard towers at the corners, exactly as intelligence had reported. Machine gun nests in each tower, 2 men visible. The main building's concrete structures built by Soviets decades ago, now crumbling, but still functional. The courtyard where prisoners would be executed. And the bunker entrance, a heavy steel door set into the ground where the hostages were being held. Movement in the courtyard. Kira's finger found the focus ring on her scope, bringing the image into sharp clarity. 8 men, kneeling, hands bound behind their backs, dressed in orange jumpsuits, the universal symbol of prisoners of humiliation, of men stripped of dignity and waiting for death. She recognized Morrison immediately. Even at 1,100 yards, even beaten and thin, his bearing was unmistakable. The way he held his head, the set of his shoulders, a warrior who refused to break even when everything was breaking around him. Dalton settled in beside her with the spotting scope. Jesus. They look bad, but alive. For now. Dalton scanned the compound, systematically cataloging threats. 4 towers confirmed. I'm seeing patrol patterns, looks like 12-man teams rotating every 15 minutes. Machine gun positions at the main gate and the bunker entrance. And he paused. There, and there, and there. Kira followed his directions. Three positions on the compound's perimeter. Sandbag emplacements. Rifles with high-powered optics. Counter-sniper teams exactly as Sterling had warned. I see three positions, Dalton said. Intel said four. The fourth one's hidden or mobile. Kira scanned systematically. North tower fixed position with thermal scope. East rooftop elevated good overwatch. West wall two shooters working together. She adjusted her scope. The fourth one's smart. He's mobile, probably moving between predetermined hides every 15 minutes. Classic counter-sniper doctrine. Dalton grunted. Al-Madani trained them well. He learned from Russians in Chechnya. They wrote the book on anti-sniper tactics. Kira marked the positions on her mental map, which means the fourth shooter is the most dangerous. He's the hunter, while the others are bait. Bryn joined them, her radio equipment already set up. She keyed the mic. Sterling, this is Callaway. We're in position. Package is visible. Multiple hostiles, requesting permission to proceed. Sterling's voice crackled through their earpieces, distant but clear. Roger that. Assess the situation. Do not engage until you've identified all counter-sniper positions. Kira, your weapon's free on my mark, but only when you're certain. One missed shoot and this all goes to hell. Kira studied the towers through her scope. Range 1,103 yards to the north tower, 1,117 to the east. Variations in elevation. Wind currently 8 miles per hour from the west, but gusting. She could see flags on the towers snapping irregularly. Temperature 95 degrees and dropping. Humidity 40%. Barometric pressure 29.8 inches. She ran the calculations in her head. At this distance, she'd need to aim approximately 30 feet above her target to compensate for bullet drop. The wind would push her shot 6 to 8 inches right. The Coriolis effect, the rotation of the Earth itself, would shift the bullet's impact by another 2 inches. She made her adjustments, dialed them into her scope. Then she waited. This was the part her father had taught her, the part that separated adequate shooters from masters. The waiting, the patience, the understanding that rushing was death and patience was survival. Time stretched. Minutes became hours. The sun finished setting. Stars appeared. The moon rose 3/4 full, bright enough to cast shadows. At 247 hours, something moved in the compound. A man emerged from the main building, tall, bearded, walking with the confidence of command. He moved to the courtyard where the prisoners knelt and stood in front of Morrison. Said something. Morrison's response was inaudible at this distance, but his body language spoke volumes, defiant, contemptuous, refusing to show fear. The man backhanded Morrison across the face. Morrison's head snapped to the side. He spit blood, turned back and said something else. The man laughed. That's Al-Madani, Dalton said quietly. The intelligence photos match. He's the commander. Kira watched through her scope as Al-Madani walked the line of prisoners, speaking to each one. Whatever he was saying, it wasn't pleasant. When he reached the end of the line, he pulled out a knife. Oh God, Bryn whispered. He's going to. Al-Madani grabbed one of the SEALs, a young man, maybe 30, and pulled him to his feet, held the knife to his throat, shouted something in Arabic. Then he cut the man's arm. Not deep, not life-threatening, just enough to draw blood to cause pain to demonstrate power. The SEAL didn't scream, didn't beg, just stared at Al-Madani with hatred so pure it was visible even at 1,100 yards. Al-Madani laughed again. He turned toward the hills, toward Kira's exact position, and raised his arms like he was addressing an invisible audience. He knows, Kira said. He knows we're here. Impossible, Dalton replied. We were careful. No way he detected. It's not about detection. It's psychology. Kira kept her scope trained on Al-Madani. He's baiting us, knows the Americans will send someone, so he's making a show of it, daring us to act. As if confirming her words, Al-Madani pointed toward the hills, shouted something. Then he pulled his sidearm and aimed it at Morrison's head. Kira's heart stopped. Through the scope, she could see Morrison's face. Calm, resigned, ready for death. Al-Madani's finger tightened on the trigger. Take the shot, Dalton urged. Kira, take the shot. Negative. Sterling's voice cut through. It's a trap. He wants you to reveal your position. But Al-Madani wasn't bluffing. His finger continued to tighten. Half a second from firing, less. Morrison closed his eyes. Kira's world narrowed to the crosshairs, to the mathematics of death and salvation, to the impossible choice between following orders and saving a life. She thought of her father, of his last mission, of the choice he'd made to run into fire to save Morrison, of the decision that had cost him everything. Being a warrior isn't about following orders, his voice whispered in her memory. It's about doing what's right when the cost is everything you have. Kira, stand down. Sterling's voice was sharp. That's an order. She ignored him, adjusted her aim. Not at Almadani, that would be the expected shot, the one he was ready for. Instead, she aimed at his gun hand, a smaller target, harder shot, but one that would save Morrison without killing Almadani immediately. She fired. The Barrett's 50 caliber round crossed 1,100 yards in less than 2 seconds. It struck Almadani's pistol with the force of a sledgehammer, destroying the weapon and shattering the bones in his hand. Almadani screamed. The gun, what was left of it, flew from his mangled hand. He stumbled backward, clutching his wrists, blood pouring between his fingers. Chaos erupted in the compound. Guards ran in every direction. Searchlights blazed to life, sweeping the hills. Automatic weapons fire ripped through the night, wild and undirected, seeking a target they couldn't see. Dalton grabbed Kira's shoulder. What the hell did you just do? Saved Morrison's life. She worked the bolt, chambering a new round. Now we finish this. The plan was to wait, to eliminate tower guards silently. You just announced our presence to every hostile in the valley. Plans change, adapt or die. Sterling's voice was ice. Akira, you just compromised the entire mesh and pull back, extract now. That's a direct order. Through her scope, Kira saw guards dragging the prisoners toward the bunker. Saw Morrison fighting them despite his bound hands. Saw two guards raise their rifles, preparing to execute the prisoners before they could be rescued. She made her decision. Negative, Sterling. We're committed. I'm engaging. She aimed at the first guard. Fired. He dropped. Aimed at the second. Fired. He fell. The compound exploded into even greater chaos. But now the guards had a direction. Now they knew where the shots were coming from. And now the counter-snipers went to work. The first bullet hit the rock 6 inches from Kira's head, spraying her with stone fragments. The second hit the ground to her left. The third went high, a ranging shot, the sniper walking his fire toward her position. They've got us zeroed, Dalton shouted. We need to move. Kira rolled right as another bullet struck where she'd been lying. She scrambled behind a larger rock, dragging the Barrett with her. Bryn, get to the secondary position. Dalton, give me covering fire on the north tower. Dalton didn't hesitate. He opened up with his M4 full auto, raking the north tower with suppressing fire. The guards ducked, giving Kira 3 seconds of breathing room. She used it. Popped up from behind the rock, acquired the counter-sniper in the north position. She could see his muzzle flash, could track the angle back to his hide. 1,150 yards. Elevated position. Difficult shot. She fired. The muzzle flash disappeared. 1 down, 3 to go, but now she had a bigger problem. In saving Morrison and engaging early, she'd revealed her position. And Almadani's counter-sniper teams were good, very good. Thermal imaging swept the ridge. Somewhere an enemy sniper was tracking her heat signature, calculating her position, preparing to end her life with a single shot. Kira did the only thing she could. She moved. Grabbed the Barrett and leopard crawled 30 yards to her left to a position she'd scouted during their approach. Less ideal for shooting the compound, but harder to target from below. She set up quickly, scanned for the next counter-sniper position. Found it. East rooftop. The sniper was repositioning, trying to get an angle on her new position. She fired before he was ready. Another hit. Another enemy down, 2 down, 2 to go. Dalton reached her new position, breathing hard. This is falling apart. We need to extract. What we need is to finish this. Kira ejected the spent magazine, loaded a fresh one. How many rounds have you got? 4 mags plus 1 in the weapon. Why, because we're not leaving. We're doubling down. She looked at him, her eyes fierce in the moonlight. You wanted to bring everyone home? Then help me make that happen. For a moment, Dalton stared at her. Then something shifted in his expression. Respect. Maybe even admiration. Tell me what you need. I need you to draw their fire. Make them think you're the primary threat. While they're focused on you, I hunt the last 2 snipers. That's a suicide mission. Only if they hit you. Don't let them hit you. Dalton laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. You're insane, just like your father. He checked his rifle. All right, give me 30 seconds to get in position. Then I'll give you the best damn distraction of your life. He moved off into the darkness. Kira waited, controlling her breathing, slowing her heart rate. The counter-snipers were searching for her. She could feel their scopes sweeping the ridge, hunting for her heat signature, her movement, any sign of where she'd gone. She made herself invisible. Not through camouflage, though her ghillie suit helped, but through absolute stillness. She became part of the rocks, part of the mountain, part of the ancient stone that had witnessed 10,000 years of human violence and remained unchanged. 30 seconds. 29. 28. At zero, Dalton opened fire from 200 yards to her right. His M4 roared on full auto tracers arcing down into the compound. He was exposed, visible, a perfect target. The counter-snipers took the bait. Muzzle flashed from the west wall, the third sniper revealing himself as he fired at Dalton. Kira swung her scope, acquired the target, 890 yards closer than before, an easier shot. She fired. The sniper fell. 3 down, 1 to go. But the last one, the fourth counter-sniper, the one they hadn't located, he was smart. He didn't reveal himself, didn't take Dalton's bait. Instead, he fired at Kira. The bullet hit her Barrett's scope with a sound like a church bell being struck by lightning. The scope exploded in a shower of glass and metal. The rifle, her primary weapon, her lifeline, was destroyed. Kira rolled away, ears ringing, face bleeding from scope fragments. Her vision blurred. Pain lanced through her shoulder, where a piece of metal had embedded itself. She blinked, forced her eyes to focus, reached for her M4A1. The fourth sniper was still out there, and now she was down to a weapon designed for medium range, against an enemy who had just proven he could hit a 4-inch target at over 1,000 yards in darkness. The odds had just turned against her. Badly. Dalton's voice in her ear. Kira status, primary weapon destroyed, switching to M4. She pulled the rifle tight against her shoulder, ignoring the blood running down her face. I need you to mark the last sniper. I can't find him. If I pop up, he'll kill me. Then don't pop up. Use your rifle flash suppressor. Short burst indirect fire, just enough to make him think you're trying to advance. If he's good, and he is, he'll take the shot. And when he does, I'll see his muzzle flash. And if you miss, then he kills both of us and the mission fails. Kira's voice was steady despite the pain. But I won't miss. Silence on the radio. Then, your father really was a legend, wasn't he? Yes. Guess it runs in the family. All right, on 3. 1, 2, 3. Dalton fired a 3-round burst into the air, not at any target, just noise and flash. Professional shooters would recognize it as suppressing fire as movement preparation. The fourth sniper recognized it and took the shot. Muzzle flash, northwest corner of the compound. Rooftop position partially hidden behind a ventilation unit. Kira saw it, tracked it, calculated distance 920 yards. Wind still 8 miles per hour. But she was using an M4A1 now, not the Barrett. Different ballistics, different trajectory. The M4 was effective to 600 yards, maybe 800 with perfect conditions. She needed to make a shot at 920 yards. In darkness, with wind, using a weapon not designed for this range. It was impossible. She fired anyway. Not once. She emptied half her magazine-controlled pairs, adjusting after each shot, walking her fire up toward the target like a sniper in reverse. On the 7th round, she saw the body fall from the rooftop. 4 counter-snipers, all eliminated. Dalton's voice carried disbelief. Did you really just make that shot? Physics and probability. If I couldn't hit him with a 1 bullet at this range, I'd hit him with 10. That's not how sniper doctrine works. I'm writing new doctrine. Kira reloaded her M4. Now let's finish this. Bryn moved to the fence line. Dalton with me. We're going in hot. Sterling's voice cut through, and this time there was no anger. Just a kind of awed respect. Kira, you just eliminated 4 trained snipers in under 10 minutes with 2 different weapons. You made shots that shouldn't be possible. And you're now going to assault a compound with 40 hostiles using a force of 3 operators. Correct, sir. Your father would be proud. A pause. Don't make me regret saying that. Bring them home. Roger that. Kira stood. Her face was bleeding. Her shoulder throbbed where the scope fragment had hit. Her primary weapon was destroyed. Her ammunition was running low. But the counter-snipers were dead. The towers were vulnerable. And 8 Americans were waiting for rescue. She looked at Dalton, at Bryn moving through the darkness toward the compound fence, at the chaos below where guards ran in confusion, where searchlights swept blindly, where Morrison and 7 other SEALs were being dragged back toward the execution yard. This was the moment, the point where planning ended and instinct began, where training became action, where doubt became certainty. Let's go get our boys, she said. And then Lieutenant Kira Ashford, daughter of Maxwell's student, of Sterling, doubted by Morrison, rejected by the system, ran down the mountainside toward a compound full of enemies with nothing but an M4A1 40 rounds of ammunition and the absolute conviction that sometimes impossible shots were the only shots worth taking. The assault had begun, and this time there would be no retreat. The compound, 14 hours. Dalton reached the fence line first. He planted charges with practiced efficiency, small-shaped explosives designed to cut through chain link without excessive noise. Kira provided overwatch from 50 yards back, her M4 sweeping for threats. The compound was still in chaos from her sniper work. Guards shouted contradictory orders. Some took defensive positions. Others ran toward the bunker where the prisoners were held. No one seemed to be in command. Al-Madani had disappeared, probably getting medical treatment for his shattered hand. Charges set, Dalton whispered into his mic. Detonation in 5, 4, 3, 2. The explosion was sharp and precise. A section of fence peeled back like opening a door. Dalton went through first weapon up, moving in the practiced combat glide of someone who had breached 1,000 objectives. Kira followed. Bryn came last, her medical pack bouncing against her back, her rifle ready despite the life-saving equipment weighing her down. They moved toward the bunker entrance, 30 yards of open courtyard, completely exposed. If the guards organized, if someone took charge, the 3 Americans would be cut down in seconds. But confusion was their ally. The guards expected a larger force, expected helicopters and armored vehicles and the full weight of American military power. 3 operators moving quietly through the darkness wasn't in their threat assessment. Kira dropped a guard who stumbled into their path 2 rounds center mass. He fell without a sound. Dalton took out another who emerged from a doorway. Bryn covered their rear. They reached the bunker entrance. Heavy steel door locked from inside. Dalton examined it, shook his head. Shaped charges will breach it, but the noise will alert everyone. We'll lose surprise. We already lost surprise when I shot Al-Madani. Kira studied the door. Then she noticed something, a ventilation shaft to the right, partially concealed by sandbags. There, air intake for the bunker, probably connects to the interior. Too small for me, Dalton said. He looked at Kira. But you buy-in, I can fit. She was already moving, pulling the sandbags aside. The shaft was 18 inches square, tight, claustrophobic, but navigable. She stripped off her tactical vest, keeping only her M4 and pistol. Give me 5 minutes. If I'm not back, blow the door and come in shooting. Kira. 5 minutes, Dalton, then chaos, understood. He nodded reluctantly. Good luck. She entered the ventilation shaft head first, pulling herself forward with her elbows. The shaft was dark hot and so narrow her shoulders scraped the sides. She breathed slowly, fighting the panic of enclosed spaces, the animal fear of being trapped in darkness with no room to move. 15 feet. 20. The shaft angled downward. She slid forward, controlling her descent, her rifle digging into her ribs. Light ahead. The shaft opened into a larger space, the bunker's interior. She could hear voices below. At least 3 speakers, maybe more. She reached the opening. It was a ceiling vent 10 feet above the bunker floor. Below she could see the layout. Large concrete room, minimal furniture, and against the far wall, the 8 Americans bound and kneeling, a guard standing over each one. Al-Madani was there too, his hand wrapped in bloody bandages, his face twisted with pain and rage. He was shouting at Morrison, who remained defiant despite fresh bruises on his face. Kira assessed the tactical situation. 8 prisoners, 8 guards, Al-Madani, 17 potential hostiles in a confined space. She had 1 M4 with 30 rounds remaining, and no backup for 5 minutes. The mathematics were brutal, but possible. She waited for the right moment, waited as Al-Madani's rage built, waited as he pulled out his pistol with his good hand and pressed it against Morrison's temple. You Americans think you're invincible, Al-Madani said in heavily accented English. Think you can invade our lands, kill our people, and face no consequences. Tonight you learn. Tonight the world watches your commander die. Morrison's voice was steady. The only thing the world will learn is that you're a coward who hides behind hostages. Al-Madani's finger tightened on the trigger. Kira dropped from the ceiling vent. She fell 10 feet, landed in a combat roll, came up with her M4 already firing. The element of surprise bought her 3 seconds in eternity in close quarters combat. Guard 1, 2 rounds, center mass down. Guard 2, 2 rounds, chest eliminated. Guard 3 turning toward her, too slow, 2 rounds, throat and head dead before he hit the ground. Al-Madani spun his pistol, tracking toward her. Kira fired first, hit him in the shoulder, knocking him backward. His pistol clattered away. Guards 4 and 5 fired at her. She dove behind a concrete pillar. Rounds sparked off stone, filling the air with dust and fragments. She blind-fired around the pillar, not aimed shots, just suppression, buying herself seconds. In those seconds, Morrison made his move. Despite his bound hands, he lunged at guard 6, hit him with his shoulder, knocked him down, used his body weight to crush the man's windpipe. The other SEALs weren't idle. Guard 7 went down to a coordinated tackle from 3 prisoners who threw themselves at him despite their bonds. Guard 8, a boy couldn't be more than 16, burst through the doorway, AK-47 raised. His hands shook. His eyes were wide with terror, not aggression. "Ahmed, shoot her!" Al-Madani screamed in Arabic. The boy Ahmed aimed at Kira. His finger found the trigger, but he was crying, whole body trembling. Kira could drop him. Easy shot, center mass. 2 seconds and the threat would be eliminated. But she saw his face. Saw someone's son. Someone forced into this moment. She lowered her rifle slightly, spoke in Arabic words her father had taught her. "You don't have to do this. Put down the weapon. Walk away, I won't follow." Ahmed stared at her. The AK-47 wavered. "Shoot her!" Al-Madani roared. Ahmed looked at his uncle, at Kira, at the Americans, at the gun in his hands. Then he dropped the rifle and ran. Al-Madani screamed in rage. "Coward traitor!" Morrison's voice hoarse but strong. "That boy might live to be better than us, because of you, Lieutenant." Silence, broken only by heavy breathing and the ringing of gunfire echoes. Kira moved to Morrison, her knife already out, cutting his bonds. "Commander, are you hurt?" Morrison stared at her, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Ashford, Lieutenant Kira Ashford." "Yes, sir." "You came." His voice carried wonder, disbelief. "After I rejected you, after I told you, 'You can thank me later, sir. Right now we need to move.'" She cut the bonds of the next SEAL, then the next, moving efficiently down the line. "Can you fight?" Morrison flexed his freed hands, testing his mobility. "Give me a weapon. I'll show you." Kira handed him her Sig Sauer, gave her combat knife to another SEAL. The others armed themselves with weapons from the dead guards. In seconds, the prisoners had transformed from helpless hostages to armed warriors. The bunker door exploded inward. Dalton and Bryn charged through, weapons ready, then stopped when they saw the situation already resolved. Dalton looked at Kira, at the dead guards, at the freed SEALs. Did you really just talk later? Move now." Kira reloaded her M4. "Sterling, this is Ashford. Package is secure. 8 souls, all mobile, requesting immediate extraction." Sterling's voice carried relief and pride. "Roger that. Extraction bird is 12 minutes out. Get to the LZ and Kira." That was one hell of a performance. They moved as a unit, now 11 operators, armed and motivated. Exited the bunker into a compound, still reeling from the sudden assault. Guards were beginning to organize, to understand what had happened. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions. Kira took point, using her M4 with brutal efficiency. She'd moved beyond thinking, beyond calculating. She operated on pure instinct. Now see threat, eliminate threat, advance, repeat. A technical mounted with a heavy machine gun roared to life near the gate. The gunner swung the weapon toward the escaping Americans. Kira couldn't penetrate the vehicle's armor with her M4. Couldn't kill the gunner from this angle. But she could see the fuel tank exposed, vulnerable, 50 yards away. She fired. 3 rounds. 2 missed. The third hit the tank. Nothing happened for half a heartbeat. Then the technical exploded in a fireball that lit up the compound like daylight. The gunner's screams were mercifully brief. They reached the breach in the fence, poured through, ran into the desert darkness beyond, leaving the burning compound behind. 2 miles to the extraction point. Morrison ran beside Kira, his face drawn with pain but his stride steady. "How many operators came for us?" "3, sir. Me, Sergeant Hayes, Lieutenant Calloway." "3." Morrison's voice carried disbelief. 3 operators assaulted a compound with 40 hostiles." "Yes, sir." "Well, that's insane." "Yes, sir, it was." They ran. Behind them, sirens wailed. Vehicles started. Pursuit would come, but the Americans had surprise darkness and 2 miles of rough terrain as advantages. At 1.5 miles, Kira's radio crackled. Not Sterling's voice. Someone new. "Ashford, this is Havoc 6. We're 30 seconds out. Heard you could use some help." Kira's heart leaped. She recognized the call sign. "Havoc 6. That's SEAL Team 6. How did—" The voice chuckled. "Commander Morrison called in a favor before he was captured. Said if anyone came for him, they'd need backup. Looks like he was right." Overhead, 2 Blackhawks materialized from the darkness. Door gunners, visible miniguns trained on the pursuit vehicles behind them. "Light 'em up," Havoc 6 ordered. The miniguns roared. Tracer rounds streaked through the night. The pursuit vehicles exploded, flipped, burned. Roads clear, Ashford. Chinooks at your LZ. Get your people home. Was Kira's voice cracked with emotion. Thank you, Havoc. Thank Morrison. He believed in you before the mission even started. Now we know why. Havoc 6 out. At mile 2, they heard the helicopter, a Chinook running dark infrared lights only. It settled into the landing zone, rotors beating the air into submission. They ran up the ramp, collapsed inside. The helicopter lifted off before the ramp even fully closed, banking hard away from the compound, away from the pursuit vehicles now visible as lights in the distance. Kira sat with her back against the bulkhead, her M4 across her lap, her face still bleeding from the destroyed scope. Her shoulder throbbed. Her body shook with adrenaline crash. Morrison sat beside her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Morrison extended his hand. Thank you, he said simply, for not giving up on us. Kira shook his hand. Warriors don't leave warriors behind, sir. My father taught me that. Morrison's eyes glistened. He nodded, unable to speak. Then he stood and addressed the other SEALs. Listen up. This woman, Lieutenant Kira Ashford, just pulled off one of the most audacious rescues in SEAL history. 3 operators, 40 hostiles, 4 enemy snipers eliminated, compound breached, all hostages recovered, 0 friendly casualties. I want every one of you to remember this moment. Remember that size doesn't matter. Gender doesn't matter. What matters is heart, courage, and the absolute refusal to quit. The SEALs, battered, exhausted, freed from certain death, gave a ragged cheer. Kira just sat there bleeding and bruised and too tired to move. But she was smiling. Because she'd done it, proved herself, saved 8 lives, made her father proud, and somewhere she knew Maxwell Ashford was watching, and smiling too. The helicopter carried them through the darkness toward safety, toward home, toward whatever came next. Behind them, Yemen burned. Ahead, a new chapter was beginning. The hospital room was too white, too clean, too sterile. Everything smelled like antiseptic and filtered air. Kira lay in the bed, her left shoulder wrapped in bandages, an IV drip feeding painkillers into her system. The doctors had removed 17 metal fragments from her face and shoulder pieces of her destroyed rifle scope, driven into her flesh by the force of the enemy sniper's bullet. She'd been lucky, they said. 2 inches to the right, and the bullet would have taken her head off. 2 inches to the left, and it would have severed her carotid artery. Instead, she'd walked away with scars that would fade and a story that wouldn't. Her mother sat in the chair beside the bed. Dr. Helen Ashford, 62 years old, silver hair pulled back, wearing civilian clothes, but carrying herself with the bearing of someone who had spent 30 years as an Army trauma surgeon. She'd flown in from Seattle the moment she'd heard about the mission. Hadn't left Kira's side since. You should rest, Helen said quietly. The surgery was only 2 days ago. I've rested enough. Kira shifted in the bed, wincing at the pain. How long until I'm cleared for duty? The doctors say 6 weeks minimum, 8 weeks to be safe. Helen's voice carried the professional assessment of a physician, but her eyes held the worry of a mother. Kira, you were shot. You had 17 pieces of metal removed from your body. You need time to heal. 6 weeks is too long. Too long for what? There's no mission waiting. The rescue is over. You succeeded. Helen reached out, took her daughter's hand. You can rest now. Kira stared at the ceiling. Outside, she could hear the normal sounds of a military hospital, doctors being paged, equipment rolling through hallways, the distant murmur of families visiting wounded warriors. She'd spent 13 years dreaming of serving, of following her father's path, of proving herself in combat. And now that she'd done the impossible thing, all she felt was empty. Mom, do you think Dad would be proud? Helen's eyes glistened. Baby, he would be beyond proud. He would be amazed. What you did in Yemen, 3 operators against 40 hostiles, 4 enemy snipers, eliminated, perfect rescue with 0 friendly casualties. That's the kind of operation they'll teach in military academies for decades. But would he think I did the right thing, disobeying orders, shooting when Sterling told me to stand down, compromising the mission plan? Your father spent his entire career making impossible choices, following orders that felt wrong, obeying commanders who didn't understand the situation on the ground. Helen's voice was firm, and I watched it eat at him. Every decision, every compromise, until the day he decided to stop following the plan and start following his conscience. That's the day he saved Morrison, and that's the day he died. Kira turned to look at her mother. You think his choice was wrong? I think his choice was his to make, just like your choices are yours. Helen squeezed her hand. You're not your father, Kira. You're yourself. And maybe that's better. Maybe you'll live longer. A knock at the door interrupted them. Colonel Wyatt Sterling stood in the doorway wearing his dress uniform ribbons spanning his chest. He looked older than he had in the Nevada desert. The mission had aged him, added lines to his weathered face. Mrs. Ashford. He nodded respectfully to Helen. May I speak with Kira? Helen stood. I'll give you privacy. I need coffee anyway. She kissed Kira's forehead. Don't let him recruit you for anything while you're on painkillers. Sterling waited until Helen left, then pulled the chair closer to the bed. For a long moment, he just studied Kira's bandaged face. You look like hell, Lieutenant. Thank you, sir. You're too kind. Sterling almost smiled. Morrison visited yesterday. Did you know that? No, sir, I was unconscious. He sat in that chair for 3 hours. Didn't say a word. Just sat there watching you breathe. Sterling's voice softened. I've known Garrett Morrison for 40 years. Served with him in Panama, Somalia, Afghanistan. Never seen him cry. Until yesterday. Kira said nothing. He blames himself for your father's death. Always has. Maxwell ran into enemy fire to save him. Took 3 bullets, died before the medevac arrived. Morrison carried that guilt for 12 years. And when you showed up looking like Maxwell, shooting like Maxwell, carrying the same fierce determination, it broke something in him. He rejected me because I reminded him of Dad. He rejected you because he couldn't bear the thought of another Ashford dying to save his life. Sterling leaned back in the chair. And then you did exactly that. Disobeyed orders, exposed yourself to enemy fire, made impossible shots, breached a compound alone, and rescued him anyway. You saved the man who didn't believe in you. I didn't do it for him, sir. I did it because it was the mission. No, Sterling's voice was gentle but firm. You did it because you're your father's daughter. Because Ashfords don't leave people behind. Because when the moment came to choose between safety and sacrifice, you chose what Maxwell would have chosen. Kira felt tears building behind her eyes. She blinked them away. Did I make the right choice, Colonel, disobeying you? Compromising the plan? I could have gotten Dalton and Bryn killed. You made the warrior's choice. The hard choice. The choice that can't be calculated with mathematics or predicted by doctrine. Sterling stood, moved to the window, looked out at the hospital grounds. I've trained 217 snipers in my career. Most of them were competent. Some were excellent. 3 were exceptional. He turned back to her. Your father was one. You're another. Who's the third? I haven't met them yet, but I'm hoping you'll train them. Pass on what you've learned. Build the next generation of warriors who understand that shooting isn't just about the rifle. It's about judgment, sacrifice, and the courage to take responsibility for impossible decisions. Before Kira could respond, another knock sounded. This time, Commander Garrett Morrison stood in the doorway. He wore his dress uniform, chest heavy with medals. His face was still bruised from captivity, but his eyes were clear, alert, carrying a weight of emotion that made him look younger, somehow more vulnerable. Colonel Sterling, sir. Morrison nodded. May I have a moment with Lieutenant Ashford? Sterling studied Morrison for a long beat. Then he nodded. She's all yours, Commander. He paused at the door. Kira, I'll be back tomorrow. We have things to discuss about your future. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Morrison stood awkwardly for a moment, like a man who'd forgotten how to exist in peaceful spaces. Then he pulled the chair to the bed and sat heavily. Lieutenant Ashford, Kira. His voice was rough. I owe you an explanation and an apology. Sir, you don't? Yes, I do. Morrison looked down at his hands. They were scarred, the knuckles still swollen from captivity. Your father was my best friend. We served together for 15 years. Afghanistan, Iraq, dozens of classified operations. He was the finest warrior I ever knew. The best shot. The clearest thinker under pressure. The kind of man you'd follow into hell without question. He paused, gathering himself. Kandahar 2012. We were hunting a high-value target, Taliban commander who'd killed 23 Marines. Intelligence said he was in a compound in the city. We went in at night, 8 operators. Should have been a textbook mission. Morrison's jaw tightened. It was an ambush. They were waiting for us. Cut us down in the first 30 seconds. I took shrapnel to the leg, couldn't walk. Maxwell grabbed me, dragged me 200 yards under fire. I told him to leave me. He refused. Said warriors don't leave warriors. Said he'd carry me to hell and back if he had to. Tears tracked down Morrison's weathered face, now cutting through the bruises. He got me to an alley, called for evac. But the Taliban were closing in. He set up his rifle, told me to stay down. Then he made the shot 1,600 yards through a sandstorm at a sniper who was about to kill both of us. Impossible shot. But he made it. I know this story, sir. You know how it ended, but you don't know what he said to me while we waited for the helicopter. Morrison's voice broke. He said, Garrett, if I don't make it, promise me something. Promise me you'll look after Kira. Make sure she knows she doesn't have to follow my path. Make sure she understands she can choose her own life. Morrison wiped his eyes roughly. I promised. And then a sniper I didn't see when Maxwell had missed put 3 rounds into him. He died 20 feet from the helicopter. Died saving me. And his last words were about you. Kira's throat was tight. She'd never heard this part of the story. Never knew her father's final thoughts were of her. When you showed up 3 months ago, Morrison continued, asking to join the teams, I saw Maxwell in you. Same eyes, same determination, same refusal to accept limits. And I panicked because I'd promised to protect you, to make sure you didn't follow his path to an early grave. So you rejected me. I rejected you because I'm a coward, because I couldn't face the possibility of another Ashford dying under my command, because I convinced myself that keeping you safe meant keeping you away from combat. Morrison met her eyes. I was wrong about everything. You're not Maxwell. You're better than Maxwell, because you have his skill, but also something he sometimes lacked the wisdom to know when not to shoot. What do you mean? In Yemen, when you shot my pistol out of al-Madani's hand instead of killing him, when you saved my life, but also preserved the possibility of capturing him alive for intelligence, Maxwell would have taken the headshot. Simpler, cleaner. You made the harder choice, the precise shot that saved me without creating an international incident over killing an enemy commander. Morrison's voice carried respect. That's not just marksmanship. That's judgment. That's what separates good snipers from legendary ones. He reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out an envelope. Official, embossed with the Navy Special Warfare seal. The Precision Marksman Unit is being established. 6 positions, female candidates now eligible. The program integrates snipers into SEAL operations with the understanding that precision shooting is both art and science. That the best snipers aren't necessarily the biggest or strongest. They're the ones with the clearest judgment under pressure. He held out the envelope. This is an official offer, Kira. First in slot, no trial period, no probation. You've already proven yourself beyond any standard we could set. Kira took the envelope with trembling hands, opened it, read the official letterhead, the formal language, the invitation that represented everything she'd worked for. Sir, I need to think about this. Morrison looked surprised. You don't want it. I don't know what I want. 2 weeks ago, all I wanted was to prove myself, to show everyone who doubted me that I belonged. And I did that. But now, she gestured at her bandages. Now I'm not sure what proving myself cost, or if the cost was worth it. What did it cost? Pieces of myself. The person I was before I killed my first human being. Before I made choices that saved 8 lives but ended a dozen others. Before I understood that being a warrior means carrying death in your heart forever. Morrison nodded slowly. That's the weight your father carried. That every combat veteran carries. The knowledge that you've ended lives. That those lives, enemy or not, had families' histories, futures that you erased. How did Dad live with it? By believing in the mission. By trusting that the lives he took were taken to save more lives. By understanding that evil exists in the world and good people have to be willing to fight it, even when fighting leaves scars. Morrison's voice was gentle. And by having people he loved like you to remind him what he was fighting for. Kira looked at the envelope, at the invitation to join an elite unit, to become exactly what she'd dreamed of being. Can I have time to decide? Take all the time you need. The offer stands whenever you're ready. Morrison stood. But Kira understands something. What you did in Yemen, that wasn't just about proving yourself. You saved 8 lives, 8 men who have families, children, futures. Whatever darkness you're carrying now, remember those 8 lights you preserved. He moved to the door, then paused. Your father would be so proud of you. Not because you're a great shot, but because you're a great human being who happens to be a great shot. That's the difference that matters. Then he was gone, leaving Kira alone with her thoughts, her pain, and the envelope that represented her future. 6 weeks later, Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. The physical therapy had been brutal. 6 weeks of rebuilding strength, flexibility, range of motion. 6 weeks of pain that sometimes made her want to quit, to walk away, to accept that maybe she'd given enough. But every morning she'd woken up and chosen to fight, chosen to push through the pain. chosen to become stronger than she'd been before the injury. Now she stood on the shooting range at Coronado, her shoulder healed enough to handle a rifle's recoil, her body cleared by medical for full duty. The Barrett M82 rested on the bench before her, a new one identical to the weapon destroyed in Yemen. Sterling stood beside her. 800 yards, 5 targets, standard qualification course. Sir, I've already qualified. Humor an old man. I want to see if Yemen changed you. Kira settled behind the rifle, checked the scope, perfect optics, crystal clear, adjusted for wind elevation temperature. The calculations came automatically now, muscle memory and instinct combining. She fired. Target 1 fell, target 2, target 3, 4, fibref. 5 shots, few hits, 23 seconds. Sterling nodded. You haven't lost a step. If anything, you're faster. Combat does that, sir, makes you efficient. Or it breaks you. Sterling's eyes were serious. Some warriors come back from their first real operation changed. Hesitant, second-guessing. They've seen what their skills can do, and it haunts them. Are you haunted, Kira? She thought about the question. About the men she'd killed in Yemen. About Al-Madani's screams when she'd destroyed his hand. About the faces she saw sometimes when she closed her eyes at night. Yes, sir, I'm haunted, but I'm not broken. Good, because I need you whole. The Precision Marksman Unit starts training in 2 months. 6 candidates. You're the only one with combat experience. The others are coming in with qualifications but no real-world application. They need someone who's been tested, someone who can teach them not just how to shoot, but how to live with what shooting means. Sir, I'm 27 years old. I've been in 1 combat operation. I'm not qualified to teach. You're more qualified than anyone else I know under the age of 60. Sterling's voice was firm. You've proven you can make impossible shots under impossible conditions. You've proven you can lead when plans fall apart. You've proven you have the judgment to save lives instead of just taking them. That's what the PMU needs, not just shooters, but warriors who understand the weight of the rifle. He pulled out a folder, handed it to her. The other 5 candidates, read their files. In 2 months, you'll be training alongside them. And I'm betting by the end of the program, they'll be learning more from you than from me. Kira opened the folder. 5 faces, 5 backgrounds, names she didn't recognize but would soon know intimately. Sir, what if I fail? What if I'm not good enough to help them? Sterling smiled. Your father asked me the same question when I started training him. You know what I told him? No, sir. I told him that the best teachers are the ones who doubt themselves, because doubt means you're thinking, questioning, refusing to accept easy answers. Arrogance makes you rigid. Doubt makes you flexible. And flexibility is what keeps you alive. He gestured at the rifle. Now shoot again, 1,200 yards this time. Show me you remember what I taught you. She shot at 1,200 yards, at 1,300, at 1,400, the absolute edge of the Barrett's capability. Each shot was a meditation, a conversation between her and the rifle, between her and the wind, between her and the ghost of her father, watching from whatever place warriors go when they die. By the time the sun began to set, painting the California coast in shades of gold and crimson, she'd fired 200 rounds. Her shoulder ached, her eyes strained from hours behind the scope. But every shot had found its mark. Sterling watched her clean the rifle with the careful attention her father had taught her. You've made your decision, haven't you? Yes, sir. And I'm in. I'll join the PMU. I'll train the next class. I'll pass on what Dad taught me, what you taught me, what Yemen taught me. She looked up at him. But on one condition. Name it. I want to establish a scholarship, in my father's name, for female candidates who want to join special operations but face financial barriers. I want to make sure the next generation has opportunities we didn't. Sterling's weathered face softened. Maxwell would love that. What would you call it? The Ashford Initiative, for women who refuse to accept limitations, who understand that size is irrelevant when you have skill and heart. Consider it done. I'll make calls, find donors. By the time the PMU starts training, the Ashford Initiative will be real. Sterling extended his hand. Welcome to the unit, Captain Ashford. Sir, I'm a lieutenant. Not anymore. Your promotion came through this morning, retroactive to the day of the Yemen operation. Turns out rescuing 8 SEALs and eliminating 4 enemy snipers in a single night is promotable. He grinned. Don't let it go to your head. Kira shook his hand, feeling the weight of new responsibility settling on her shoulders. Captain, instructor, role model, legacy bearer. It was terrifying. And exactly right. 6 months later, PMU graduation ceremony. 2 weeks before graduation, the weight of choice. Kira stood alone on the beach long after the training day ended. The sun had set an hour ago. Stars filled the sky, the same stars that had watched over Yemen, over her father's last mission, over every warrior who'd ever made an impossible choice. She pulled out her father's notebook, flipped to the page she'd written after training her first class, read her own words. "I'm scared, Dad. Scared I'll fail these candidates." But she hadn't failed them. Thorne had made the shot. All 5 graduates were ready. The program was a success, so why did she still feel empty? Footsteps in the sand. Morrison appeared from the darkness, walking slowly, his legs still bothering him from Yemen. "Thought I'd find you here." He sat beside her on the sand. "You're thinking about the men you killed?" It wasn't a question. 12 confirmed, Kira said quietly. In Yemen, 12 human beings who woke up that morning not knowing it was their last day. 12 families who lost someone because of me. They were enemy combatants, holding Americans hostage, planning to execute us on camera. I know all of that, and I'd make the same choices again." She closed the notebook. "But that doesn't make it easy to live with." Morrison was silent for a long moment. "Your father told me once the night before his last mission that every person he killed stayed with him. Not as guilt, as responsibility. He said, 'Garrett, I don't kill because I enjoy it. I kill because if I don't, good people die. But I remember every face, every name when I can learn it. Because the moment I stop seeing them as human, I become the monster I'm fighting.'" Tears streamed down Kira's face now. "I can't remember their faces. It all happened so fast. I don't even know their names. But you remember the boy, Ahmed, the one you didn't shoot?" "Yes." "Why Balmo?" "Because I saw his face, really saw it, saw the fear, saw someone's son, saw a future that didn't have to end in violence." Morrison nodded. "That's the difference between a shooter and a warrior. A shooter sees targets. A warrior sees human beings and makes the hard choice anyway. You're haunted because you're human, and you're a warrior because you did what was necessary despite being haunted." He stood, brushed sand from his uniform. "At graduation, they'll pin a medal on your chest. They'll celebrate your success. But the real measure of what you've accomplished isn't the shots you made. It's the boy you didn't shoot, the judgment you showed, the warriors you've trained to think before they pull the trigger." He started to walk away, then stopped. "Your father carried his ghost until the day he died, but he also carried hope. Hope that the next generation would be wiser, more careful, more humane. You're that hope, Kira. Don't waste it by drowning in regret." Then he was gone. Kira sat alone for another hour, thought about Yemen, about al-Madani, about the guard she'd killed, about Ahmed who she'd spared, about Thorne making the impossible shot, about 5 warriors ready to carry the Ashford legacy forward. She thought about her father, about Maxwell Ashford who'd carried his ghost with honor, who'd made impossible choices and lived with the consequences, who'd died saving the man who just walked away. She understood now. The weight wouldn't get lighter, the faces wouldn't fade, the choices would always haunt her. But that was the price of being a warrior. Not the shooting, the living afterward. She opened the notebook one last time, wrote a final entry, "And then I understand now why you told Morrison I was special. Not because I can shoot, but because I understand that every shot has consequences that last forever. I've killed 12 people, saved 8, spared one boy who might grow up to choose peace. I'm haunted, I'm scared, I'm uncertain, but I'm also proud. Proud of what we've built, proud of the warriors carrying your legacy forward, proud that I chose judgment over easy violence. You once said the moment I stop seeing them as human, I become the monster I'm fighting. I see them, Dad. All of them, the ones I killed and the ones I saved. And I'll carry them all the way you carried yours, with honor, with regret, with the hope that someday warriors like me won't be needed anymore. But until that day comes, I'll do what you taught me. I'll make the hard choices. I'll pull the trigger when I must. And I'll remember every face, because that's what Ashfords do." Your daughter forever changed but not broken, Kira. She closed the notebook, stood, looked out at the ocean one last time. Tomorrow graduation, tomorrow celebration, tomorrow the future. But tonight she mourned, for the men she'd killed, for the innocence she'd lost, for the weight she'd carry forever. And she made peace with it, because being her father's daughter meant carrying light into dark places, even when the darkness lived inside her too. The ceremony was held on the Coronado Beach at sunset. 200 guests, military personnel, families, dignitaries. The 5 PMU graduates stood in dress uniform, their faces weathered by 6 months of brutal training, their eyes carrying the calm certainty of warriors who'd been tested and proven. Sterling stood at the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, we gather today to celebrate the first graduating class of the Precision Marksman Unit. These 5 warriors represent the future of precision warfare operators who combine extraordinary marksmanship with sound judgment, who understand that the most important decision is often choosing not to shoot. He called each graduate forward, presented them with their PMU insignia, a modified trident with a crosshair at its center, symbolizing the marriage of SEAL tradition and sniper precision. Lieutenant Thorne Beckett, Sergeant Bryn Calloway, Lieutenant Vaughn Mercer, Corporal Sloan Hartley, Sergeant Rowan Cross. When all 5 had received their insignia, Sterling spoke again. This program exists because one warrior proved that size, gender, and conventional wisdom are irrelevant when faced with skill, courage, and judgment. Captain Kira Ashford, please join me. Kira walked to the podium. In the audience, she saw her mother, tears streaming down her face. Saw Morrison standing at attention, pride evident in his bearing. Saw Dalton and Bryn from the Yemen team smiling. Sterling held up a medal. The Maxwell Ashford Distinguished Service Award, established to honor snipers who demonstrate exceptional marksmanship, sound judgment, and unwavering commitment to protecting innocent life. The first recipient is the woman who established this award and embodies its principles, Captain Kira Ashford. He pinned the medal to her uniform. The audience erupted in applause. Morrison approached carrying a long case. He opened it, revealing a rifle. But not just any rifle, a custom M40A3 perfectly maintained with specific modifications that Kira recognized immediately. This belonged to your father, Morrison said, his voice thick with emotion. I've kept it for 12 years, waiting for someone worthy to carry it forward. I believe that person is you. Kira took the rifle with trembling hands, ran her fingers over the stock, the barrel, the scope, felt her father's presence in every carefully maintained surface. Thank you, sir. No, thank you. For saving my life. For proving that the Ashford legacy isn't about one warrior, it's about a tradition of excellence that transcends generations. Morrison saluted her. Your father would be so proud, Kira, of the warrior you've become, of the teacher you are, of the legacy you're building. Kira returned the salute. Then she turned to face the audience, holding her father's rifle, wearing his medal, standing in the sunset light that painted the California coast in shades of gold and fire. She spoke, her voice steady and strong. My father taught me that being a warrior isn't about the rifle. It's about the moment before you pull the trigger, the choice you make when lives hang in the balance, the judgment that separates necessary violence from unnecessary cruelty. 2 years ago, a commander told me I was too small, too weak, that I'd get men killed. He was wrong. But he was also right to doubt, because doubt makes us question ourselves, push ourselves, become better than we thought possible. The Precision Marksman Unit exists to create warriors who shoot with skill and think with wisdom, who understand that every shot has consequences beyond the target, who carry the weight of their decisions with honor and humility. She paused, her voice dropping lower, more intimate. But I want to share something else with you, something they don't teach in sniper school. The audience leaned in. In Yemen, I killed 12 people. Confirmed. 12 human beings who had families, histories, futures. I can justify every shot. Every one was necessary to save American lives. But justification doesn't erase the weight. Morrison's eyes widened. This wasn't in the prepared speech. I'm haunted by their faces. I wake up some nights seeing them. And I've learned that's not weakness, that's humanity. The day we stop feeling the weight of our choices is the day we become the monsters we fight. She looked at the 5 graduates. You'll make impossible shots, you'll save lives, and you'll also end them. That's the burden of precision warfare, not just the shooting, the living afterward. Thorne's face was serious now, understanding. My father taught me remember every face, carry every choice. Because the moment you stop seeing them as human, you've lost the war that matters most, the war for your own soul. She held up her father's rifle one final time. This weapon is power. Use it wisely. Use it reluctantly. Use it only when no other option exists. And when you do use it, remember, you're not just taking a shot. You're taking responsibility for everything that follows. The beach was silent. Even the ocean seemed to quiet. To the next generation of snipers, the women and men who'll carry this tradition forward, remember, You are the inheritors of a legacy built by warriors who refused to accept limitations, who made impossible shots under impossible conditions, who chose judgment over aggression, wisdom over recklessness, protection over destruction. She held up her father's rifle. This weapon he has saved countless lives, has ended threats and preserved innocence. Now it passes to a new generation, and with it the responsibility to honor those who came before by being worthy of their sacrifice. Welcome to the legacy, Kira finished. May you carry it with more wisdom than I had. May you make fewer mistakes. May you build a world where warriors like us aren't needed. She stepped back from the podium. For 3 seconds, no one moved. Then Morrison started clapping, slowly, deliberately, then Sterling, then Helen, then every warrior, every family member, every dignitary. The applause wasn't celebration. It was acknowledgement. Recognition that they'd witnessed something rare, a warrior who understood that the real battle wasn't on the battlefield. It was in the mirror every morning after. The sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in violent beauty. The ceremony concluded with a 21-gun salute, the ancient tradition of honoring warriors who'd served with distinction. As the final shot echoed across the beach, Kira closed her eyes and felt her father's presence, felt his pride, felt his love reaching across death to remind her that she'd done something impossible. She'd taken rejection and turned it into validation, taken doubt and forged it into certainty, taken her father's legacy and built something new from its foundation. The Ashford tradition didn't end with Maxwell's death. It had only just begun. And as Kira walked from the ceremony, her father's rifle in her hands, surrounded by warriors she'd trained and warriors she'd saved, she understood finally what it meant to be her father's daughter. It meant carrying light into dark places, making impossible shots when necessary, choosing wisdom over violence when possible, and building a future where warriors shot not out of hatred, but out of love for those they protected. The sun set, the ceremony ended, the warriors dispersed to their futures, but the legacy continued. Generation to generation, Ashford to Ashford, from father to daughter to all who would follow. And somewhere Maxwell Ashford smiled. His daughter had not just matched his legend, she had surpassed it.